Step away from the vehicle now.
I haven't done anything.
Sir, do you know why I pulled you over?
Rain slicked the asphalt outside a suburban gas station, the neon sign flickering open 24 hours like a lie. Daniel Ward leaned against his car, suit jacket damp at the shoulders, holding his son's basketball in one hand. They were heading home after a late practice, until blue lights painted the street. Step away from the vehicle. The officer's voice cut through the rain. Sergeant Blake, broad-shouldered, jaw locked, hand resting on his holster. Daniel blinked, confused. Is there a problem, officer? License and registration. You match the description. Daniel opened his wallet slowly. His son sat frozen in the passenger seat. The description of what? Armed robbery. Blake's tone was flat, rehearsed, the kind that already knew the ending. Daniel's hand trembled as he passed the documents. You can check my ID. I said, hands where I can see them. Blake barked, drawing his weapon an inch. The metallic click echoed louder than the thunder. The boy's voice cracked. Dad. Daniel raised his hands. His throat burned. He'd argued constitutional law in front of the Supreme Court, lectured senators on due process, but here, none of that mattered. Then Blake looked at the ID. His eyes flicked from the name to Daniel's face. His breath hitched. Chief Justice Daniel Ward, United States Supreme Court. The silence that followed was heavier than the rain. Blake's mouth opened a pale shape in the dark. Sir, ... Daniel didn't move, didn't blink. He only said, voice cold as marble, you just pointed a gun at the Constitution. The siren lights spun red and blue across Blake's pale face, and somewhere, a phone camera started recording that the world was about to watch. Rain drummed against the roof of the car, steady and cruel. Daniel Ward sat motionless, hands still raised as the officer's flashlight burned into his eyes. The reflection of red and blue pulsed over his son's frightened face. Step out of the vehicle, sir, Blake ordered. Daniel inhaled slowly, the years of courtroom composure holding him upright. Officer, I have done nothing wrong. My son and I were heading home. Now, the word cracked like a whip. He stepped out, shoes splashing in puddles, the air thick with gasoline and wet asphalt. The phone in a bystander's hand trembled, the recording light blinking like judgment. Face the car, hands on the hood. Daniel obeyed, the metal cold against his palms. Behind him, his son's voice shook. Dad, it's all right, Isaiah, he murmured, steady but low. Stay inside. Blake's gloved hand patted him down, rough, impersonal. Got any weapons, sir? Just words, Daniel said softly. Plenty of those. Blake snorted. That's so. What kind of words you throw around in that suit? The lawful kind. The silence that followed was jagged. Blake's jaw tightened. Don't get smart. Wouldn't dream of it. Backup arrived, 2 more officers stepping into the rain. They exchanged quick glances, uncertain. The youngest muttered, Sarge, you see his id. Blake's nostrils flared. Yeah, I saw it. Then why? Procedure, Blake snapped. Daniel turned slightly. Procedure doesn't justify humiliation. The crowd shifted. A woman whispered, that's the Chief Justice, right? Her voice carried. Blake froze. The reality pressed in the badge on his chest. The cameras, the power he'd abused. For one suspended second, everything was still. Then he grabbed Daniel's wrist. You're under temporary detainment. On what grounds? Daniel's voice was raised. Resisting verification, Daniel's laugh was bitter and low. You don't even know the law you hide behind. Sir, please, the younger officer whispered. Let him go. Blake didn't answer. He only felt the burning stare of the child in the car, a reflection of every face he'd dismissed before. Daniel didn't resist when they cuffed him. The metal clicked around his wrists, cold and final. My son is watching, he said quietly. Don't make this uglier than it already is. Blake hesitated. For a heartbeat, guilt flashed across his face, then vanished behind training and pride. He pushed Daniel toward the squad car. The crowd filmed in silence. No one stepped forward. The rain fell harder, washing over them all, indifferent. As the door shut, Daniel's reflection in the glass stared back at him, composed, unbroken, burning, blue lights, he murmured under his breath, and blood pressure. The car pulled away, sirens rising like judgment into the night. The fluorescent lights hummed with the low monotone of bureaucracy. Cold benches lined the wall. A stale smell of disinfectant and old fear clung to the air. Daniel sat in the corner of the holding cell, wrists raw where the cuffs had been, He'd seen this place before, not as a man in custody, but as an observer of justice. The irony bit deep. Across the bars, an officer logged notes into a computer, avoiding his eyes. Name, he asked, already knowing. Daniel Ward. The officer's fingers paused. The name was an infection spreading through the department. They all knew now. He looked up briefly, guilt flickering, then down again. You'll be processed shortly, sir. Sir, Daniel repeated, voice low. That word didn't exist 20 minutes ago. The man flinched. I'm just following orders. That line, Daniel said, has built entire graveyards. Silence. The sound of rain against metal echoed faintly from somewhere beyond. A younger officer approached, dark-skinned, early 20s, uniform to stiff, expression torn between duty and conscience. Chief Ward. Sir, Daniel's gaze lifted. You're new? Yes, sir. Officer Yolan Brooks. I'm sorry about. Don't apologize for a system designed to need scapegoats, Daniel said. His tone was not cruel, only tired. Apologize when you stop enforcing it. Yolan swallowed hard. They told me not to speak to you. Then don't, Daniel replied. But listen. He leaned forward slightly, voice lowering. Every law you enforce without question becomes a confession you'll have to live with. Blake appeared at the end of the corridor, clipboard in hand, jaw clenched like a man holding his world together with his teeth. Brooks, step aside. Yolan obeyed immediately, spine straight. Blake's eyes met Daniel's through the bars. You'll be released once we clear your ID. You cleared it an hour ago, Daniel said. You're not verifying, you're delaying consequence. Blake's lips pressed thin. Watch your tone. Daniel smiled faintly. I'm not the one trembling. Blake gripped the clipboard tighter. You think this'll go away because of who you are. You think the internet outrage changes. What happened? Daniel's stare didn't waver. It doesn't need to. The truth is louder than outrage. You've already lost. Blake stepped closer, lowering his voice. I was doing my job. Daniel rose slowly, meeting him eye to eye. Then your job is broken. For a brief, fragile instant, Blake's composure cracked. Sweat beaded at his temple. Behind the practiced authority, there was a flicker of something human. Fear. Shame. Maybe both. Jalen shifted uncomfortably in the background. Sarge, command says to release him. They're on the phone with the DA. Blake's jaw flexed. Tell them he's being processed, sir, they said immediately. The corridor went still. The power dynamic that had defined the last hour faltered. Donnell turned away, settling back on the bench. You can't outrun the paperwork. It always leads back to the signature. Blake stared, then turned abruptly, walking off. The echo of his boots carried down the hall. Sharp, uneven. Jalen hesitated by the door. They'll send a car to take you home. Sir, I just wanted to say, I joined to make a difference. Daniel looked at him with tired eyes. Then make one. Start by recognizing who you serve. Yolan nodded, uncertain, and left. Minutes later, another officer, older, weary, approached with a ring of keys. Chief Ward, you're free to go. Daniel stood. The man unlocked the cell but didn't meet his gaze. You didn't deserve this, he muttered. No one does, Daniel replied. That's the problem. As he walked out, the sound of the key turning behind him was almost merciful. He moved down the corridor, walls gray, floor slick with disinfectant, cameras overhead, every detail engraved into his memory. Outside, the storm had softened to drizzle. The air was cold, raw. A black sedan waited at the curb. His driver stood stiffly by the door, eyes down. Home, sir. Yes, Daniel said. His voice was steady again, the courtroom cadence returning. But inside, something had cracked, a quiet fracture that would not heal easily. Through the tinted window, the police station receded into the night. Flashbulbs flared across the street, reporters gathering, voices rising. The story was already escaping its walls. Daniel closed his eyes. The echo of Blake's voice still clung to him. You think the internet outrage changes what happened? No, he thought. Outrage never changes the past. But exposure does something worse. It strips the mask from power. And this time, the mask had already started to fall. The waiting room reeked of burnt coffee and anxiety. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, turning every minute into an interrogation. Isaiah sat on the plastic chair, his hands gripping the basketball against his knees so tightly his knuckles whitened. The orange leather was the only familiar thing left in the world. His mother, Alicia, stood near the counter, her voice restrained but sharp. I want to know why my husband hasn't been released yet. You've confirmed his identity. The desk sergeant didn't look up. Ma'am, please have a seat. We're following standard. Standard. She leaned forward. Do you realize who you're talking about? Isaiah flinched at her tone, not because she was angry, but because she was trying not to be. The anger lived under her breath, caged. Across the room, one officer muttered something under his breath. Another chuckled. Alicia caught it. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Isaiah looked up at her, eyes wide. Mom, are they gonna hurt Dad? Her breath hitched, the mask of composure shattering for a split second. No, baby, they can't. But they did, he said softly. I saw it. The words hit her harder than any insult could. She crouched beside him, brushing the damp curls from his forehead. You remember what your father always says about fear? He shook his head. That courage isn't the absence of fear, it's what you do while you're shaking. Her voice trembled at the end. She swallowed it down, stood, and faced the officers again. Get your captain out here, now. The room quieted. A phone rang somewhere behind the glass partition. Murmurs rose. Then, through the doors, Daniel appeared, shoulders squared, face unreadable, cuffs gone but marks still visible on his wrists. Isaiah bolted from his seat. Dad. Daniel caught him mid-run, holding him tight. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The stares, the cameras, the whispers, just the heartbeat of a father reminding a child that he was still here. You okay? Daniel whispered. Isaiah nodded, but his voice was small. He pointed a gun at you. Daniel's grip tightened. He pointed it at something bigger than me. Alicia approached, fury held behind trembling hands. Daniel, we're leaving. Right now. They moved toward the exit. Reporters crowded the doors, microphones, flashes, questions that sounded more like accusations. Justice Ward, do you intend to press charges? Do you believe this was racially motivated? Is this a political stunt? Daniel paused at the threshold, rain misting across his face. A man draws a weapon on another man because of color, he said evenly. You tell me what to call that. The silence that followed was heavier than noise. Cameras clicked, recording his exhaustion more than his anger. Alicia tugged at his sleeve. Let's go. They stepped into the night, the car waiting. Isaiah clutched his basketball, silent, staring at the reflection of red and blue, still flashing against the wet pavement, from the back seat. His small voice broke the quiet. Dad, are we safe? Daniel turned, his face softening. We're alive. That's different. Will he say sorry? Daniel looked out the window. People like him don't apologize, he said, then paused. But they get remembered. Isaiah nodded slowly, not understanding fully, but enough to feel the weight of it. Alicia reached for Daniel's hand. Her touch was warm, steady. They humiliated you, she whispered. He exhaled. No, they exposed themselves. The car pulled into the night, headlights cutting through the drizzle. Behind them, the police station faded, a gray blur against the storm. Isaiah rested his head against the window, eyes following the rain streaks. He didn't cry. He just held the basketball tighter, as if gripping the shape of something that used to be simple. That night, he would dream of blue lights and wake up afraid of sirens by morning. The city had already chosen sides. Clips of Daniel's arrest looped across every channel. Shaky cell phone footage of Blake shouting, Daniel's calm defiance, Isaiah's terrified face framed in rain and light. Talk shows dissected the scene like vultures around a carcass. One host leaned forward smirking. Was this really racism, or just another case of overblown social outrage? Daniel watched the coverage in silence from his study. The room smelled of coffee and cold resolve. Alicia stood behind him, arms folded. They're turning it into entertainment, she said bitterly. That's what they do when the truth threatens comfort, he replied. The screen cut to a police press conference. Blake stood at the podium, eyes hollow, mouth rehearsed. The department takes full responsibility for any misunderstanding, he said. Our officers acted in good faith during an ongoing investigation. Daniel's fingers tightened around his mug. Good faith, he murmured, the oldest lie in American justice. Alicia turned off the TV. Don't watch it. I have to, he said. They're writing the narrative in real time. She looked at him, the exhaustion beneath his steady tone, the quiet fury he never allowed to rise. Then write it back, she said. He didn't answer. His phone buzzed. Another call from the court's ethics committee. He ignored it. Across town, Sergeant Blake sat alone in his office, scrolling through social media feeds filled with his own name. Death threats mixed with praise. Hero cop, racist thug, public servant, liar. Every comment dug a little deeper into his chest. The door opened. Captain Heller stepped in, his expression grim. "You're on administrative leave." Blake looked up, stunned. "You're kidding. Until this blows over. I followed protocol." "You pointed a weapon at the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court." Blake's throat went dry. "I didn't know who he was." "That's not the point anymore," Heller said. "The cameras did." He left without another word. Blake slumped back, the hum of the air conditioner sounding like judgment. In the court building, Daniel's assistant met him in the hallway. "Sir, the press won't leave the entrance. Reporters are asking if you'll step down from the bench during the inquiry." Daniel paused. "An inquiry into what?" "Optics, sir. They say your position compromises the investigation." He almost laughed. "My position compromises their comfort, not the law." He entered his chambers. The familiar walls felt foreign portraits of past justices, shelves lined with precedent, the quiet reverence of reason. It all seemed smaller now, like justice itself had shrunk under the weight of spectacle. Minutes later, his phone rang again, this time from the President's Counsel. "Chief Ward," the voice said, calm but firm, "the administration recommends discretion. Avoid statements. Let the process play out." Daniel closed his eyes. "You mean let the noise drown the truth?" "Sir." He hung up. That evening, Alicia scrolled through the news on her tablet. "They're calling it the gas station arrest. Hashtags trending in 40 states. Good," Daniel said quietly. "Let them see what ordinary looks like under fear." Isaiah sat on the couch, headphones in, pretending not to listen. But every few seconds, his eyes flicked toward the muted TV, the image of his father, handcuffed, replaying again and again. "Dad," he said finally, "are they gonna fire the cop?" Daniel looked at him, hesitating. "That's not how this works, son." "Then, how does it work?" He sighed, slowly, too slowly. Later that night, Daniel stepped outside. The rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened under the street. A neighbor passing by nodded, awkward, cautious, reverent, now that the world knew who he was. "Hell of a thing, Judge," the man said. "World's gone crazy, huh?" Daniel studied him. "No," he said. "It's just finally showing its reflection." The man didn't reply. He just walked away, pretending not to understand. From somewhere nearby, a television blared Blake's voice again. "I feared for my safety." Daniel turned his gaze upward, watching a plane cross the sky, its blinking lights cutting through darkness. He thought of every black father who never made it home, of every name reduced to a hashtag, of every courtroom that pretended not to see. Alicia joined him on the porch, wrapping her shawl tighter. "You know this won't end quietly," she said. "It never does," Daniel answered. "But it ends, eventually. Do you still believe in the system?" He looked at her, the woman who'd seen him fight 1,000 small wars in silence. "Belief isn't the point," he said. "Responsibility is." Behind them, Isaiah's voice called from inside, small but clear. "Dad, someone's knocking." Daniel turned. Headlights flashed across the yard. A black SUV idled by the gate. 2 men in dark suits stepped out, badges catching the porch light. One of them spoke through the rain's aftertaste. "Chief Justice Ward, we need to talk." The sound of cameras outside grew louder, the press already gathering again. Daniel straightened his tie. "Then, let's talk." He stepped forward into the glare, a man who'd already been judged by the world, walking toward the only justice that still mattered, truth, exposed and unvarnished. The conference room inside the Justice Department smelled of tension and polished oak. Frosted glass walls muted the buzz of journalists outside. Inside sat a handful of the nation's most powerful officials, and one man who no longer trusted the system he'd spent his life defending. Chief Justice Daniel Ward occupied the far seat, posture straight, expression carved from restraint. Across from him, Attorney General Moore adjusted his tie. "We're here to contain this before it compromises judicial integrity." Daniel's eyes flicked upward. "Contain what, exactly? The footage or the truth?" Moore exhaled. "You're a public figure. This incident places the court in a politically delicate position. The administration is afraid." Daniel cut in. His voice didn't rise, but the words landed like stones. "Afraid the law might look human for once." At the end of the table, a PR advisor clicked through slides on a tablet. "Our polling shows deep division. Some view you as a victim of systemic racism. Others think you're exploiting your position." Daniel turned toward her. "I didn't exploit anything. I was handcuffed for existing." She hesitated, then forced a polite smile. "Sir, perception is what we manage, not justice." Daniel leaned forward. That sentence right there is why this country bleeds. A silence fell so dense that even the fluorescent lights seemed to dim. The deputy chief of staff broke it. We recommend a statement, neutral in tone, legally no. You condemn the act but affirm faith in due process. No accusations, no direct blame. You want me to sound grateful, Daniel said. We want stability, Moore replied. Your restraint could prevent chaos. Daniel's jaw tightened. Restraint is how this began. From the corner, a younger official spoke up, nervous, idealistic. Sir, people are angry. They're looking to you. If you lash out, it'll split the country. Daniel looked at him evenly. Then maybe it needs to split long enough to see what's rotting in the center. No one spoke after that. Finally, Moore said quietly, we'll circulate a draft statement. You'll have final approval. Daniel stood. You won't get one. He turned to leave, but Moore's voice followed. This could destroy careers, Daniel. Yours included. Daniel paused at the door. If a career can't survive truth, it doesn't deserve to. He left without waiting for permission. Outside, the hallway buzzed with aides and whispers. Reporters craned from behind security ropes, shouting his name. Cameras flashed. He walked through them all, like through rain, unflinching, unhurried, across town, in a small apartment. Sergeant Blake sat at his kitchen table, the glow of the TV flickering across his pale face. His wife, Lena, hovered in the doorway. They're saying the department might throw you under the bus, she said softly. Blake didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the broadcast. Daniel walking through cameras, head high. He's making you look like a monster, Lena said. Blake's hands trembled slightly. Maybe I am. She frowned. Don't start that again. He looked up at her, eyes bloodshot. You didn't see his face, Lena. He didn't flinch. Not once. I've stopped men tougher than him. They all broke. But he looked at me like I'd just proven his point. She came closer, voice firm. You were doing your job. Was I? He whispered. Or was I protecting something I don't even believe in anymore? Lena's silence answered for her. The news anchor's voice carried over the room. Chief Justice Ward refuses to issue a statement, intensifying scrutiny on the police department. Blake shut off the TV. They'll want someone to blame, he muttered. Then fight back, Lena said, before they bury you. He looked at her, hollow. You don't bury rot, you just expose it. Back at home, Daniel stood by the living room window, rain beginning again outside. Alicia entered quietly. Haba, she asked. He didn't turn. They want silence disguised as professionalism. And you, I want truth without the permission slip. Alicia stepped closer, resting her hand on his arm. You can't fix a country overnight. I'm not trying to fix it, Daniel said. I'm trying to make it admit what it is. She nodded slowly, then braced for the backlash. He looked at her, eyes dark but steady. I've spent my whole life bracing. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, the kind that promised another storm coming. Inside, Daniel knew it wouldn't be weather this time. It would be war, fought in headlines, in hearings, in hearts too stubborn to change. And for once, he didn't intend to stay silent. Sergeant Blake woke before dawn, drenched in sweat. The echo of Daniel's voice haunted his dreams. He just pointed a gun at the Constitution. He sat up in the dock, rubbing his face. The house was silent, his wife still asleep beside him. On the nightstand lay his service pistol badge and a folded suspension notice. He stared at the badge. It used to mean certainty, purpose. Now it just looked like metal pretending to be morality. By noon, he was at the station, stripped of command, waiting for internal affairs. His uniform hung on him differently, a costume that didn't fit anymore. Officers passed by with stiff nods, eyes avoiding his. The silence said everything. You're toxic now. Captain Heller appeared in the doorway. IA will see you in 10. Blake didn't look up. You could have warned me. I did, Heller said flatly. You just didn't listen. He left. Blake stared at the empty hallway, the same hallway where he'd walked new recruits, preached discipline, lectured about safety. It all rang hollow now. He could still feel the rain from that night, the weight of the gun in his hand, the look in Daniel's eyes. When internal affairs called him in, the interrogation room felt colder than usual. The investigator, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, pressed record. Sergeant Blake, we're here to review your conduct during the incident involving Chief Justice Daniel Ward. He cleared his throat. I followed procedure. He matched the description. I drew your weapon on an unarmed man with his son present. She interrupted. He didn't comply immediately. She raised a brow. He asked you what the problem was. Blake hesitated. Tone matters. Tone, she repeated slowly. You pulled a gun because of tone. He exhaled, tired. You've never been out there at night, have you? Her gaze didn't soften. You're not on trial for fear, Sergeant. You're on review for control. Blake leaned back, eyes closing. Control's easy until the mask slips. What mask? He opened his eyes again, voice low. The one that tells you you're the good guy. Silence. The recorder clicked softly in the background. After the meeting, he walked out into the parking lot. The afternoon light hit hard, sharp, unforgiving. He leaned against his car, pulling out a cigarette he hadn't touched in years. His hands shook, lighting it. A familiar voice came from behind. You look like hell. He turned. Officer Yalen Brooks stood there, hands in pockets. The young man looked both guilty and defiant. Brooks, Blake said, you still wearing the badge? For now. Blake gave a humorless laugh. Don't get too attached. Yalen studied him. I watched the video again. You didn't have to do what you did. Yeah, Blake said. But I did. Why? Blake took a drag, exhaling slow. Because when you grow up in this system, you stop seeing people just threats and reports. Jalen's jaw tightened. Then, stop pretending that's duty. Blake met his gaze. You think I don't know that now? The young officer hesitated. You could still say something. Own it. Blake flicked the cigarette away. You don't understand. They built this machine to eat men like me, the obedient ones, and when it finally breaks, it'll spit us out and say we were the problem all along. Yalun stepped closer. Then, at least don't let them lie about how it broke. Blake didn't answer. The words hung heavy between them. That evening, he drove home and sat in his car for a long time, watching the lights from the neighboring houses. Kids laughed somewhere down the street. A dog barked. Life went on. Indifferent. Lena appeared at the door. You're not coming in. He shook his head. Not yet. She crossed her arms. They called. You're suspended indefinitely. Pay's frozen. He nodded. Figures. What are you going to do? He stared at the badge again, the edges catching the light. For the first time, he said quietly, maybe tell the truth. She looked at him, uncertain. You think anyone'll listen? He smiled bitterly. No, but maybe they'll remember. When he finally went inside, the house felt smaller, quieter. He hung the badge on the hook by the door, not with pride, but with mourning. Upstairs, Lena whispered, you can still fix this. Blake sat on the bed, head in hands. No, he said, but I can stop pretending it isn't broken. Outside, rain began again, tapping softly against the window, the same rhythm from that night. He lay back, eyes open to the dark ceiling. For the first time, he didn't feel like a cop. He felt like a man finally seeing the cracks in his own armor and realizing they were shaped like the faces he'd ignored. The courtroom was full before sunrise. Reporters filled the benches, cameras lined the corridor, and the quiet hum of murmured conversations wrapped the air like static. Daniel Ward entered through the side door, every movement controlled. His black suit was crisp, expression unreadable. To the world, he was the Chief Justice, embodiment of law. To himself, he was still the man who'd knelt on asphalt with a gun in his face. He paused at the prosecutor's table. Across the room sat Sergeant Blake, no uniform, no badge, just a man in a worn suit, hands folded, eyes distant. The murmur in the courtroom stilled when Daniel took his seat at the bench. He didn't look at Blake immediately. He simply said, voice steady, court is now in session. Every word carried weight, the same weight Blake had ignored that night. The prosecutor rose. Your Honor, this hearing concerns the misconduct and abuse of authority by Sergeant Matthew Blake. The evidence includes body cam footage, multiple eyewitness statements, and testimony from the victim, who, in this instance, is yourself. A ripple went through the room. Cameras clicked softly. Blake looked up then, eyes locking with Daniel's for the first time since the incident. There was no rage in either man's face, only the terrible recognition of what they both represented. Daniel nodded to the prosecutor. Proceed. The footage began on the screen. Rain, flashing lights, Blake shouting commands, the scene replayed in high definition, the barrel of the gun, inches from Daniel's chest, his son's scream echoing faintly from the car. The room was silent except for the recorded voice, hands where I can see them. Then, Daniel's voice. Calm, restrained officer, I'm the chief. The gun lifted higher. Freeze frame. Daniel's throat tightened, but he didn't flinch. The image held long enough for everyone to feel its weight. The prosecutor turned. Sergeant Blake, you will explain your actions. Blake stood. The courtroom lights seemed harsher under his fatigue. He matched the description. I made a call. It was wrong. That's all. He exhaled. That's everything. Daniel watched him carefully. There was no apology in the tone, only exhaustion. A man cornered by his own reflection. Do you understand the gravity of pointing a weapon at a federal judge, let alone a black father in front of his child? The prosecutor asked. Blake hesitated. I do now. The prosecutor stepped closer. Now, or only because it was recorded? Blake's jaw tensed. You think the camera changes anything? It just makes people pretend to care for a few weeks. A low murmur rippled through the audience. Daniel lifted a hand, silencing the room. Sergeant, he said quietly, what do you think justice looks like? Blake turned toward him. The silence was total. Justice? He repeated. It looks like everyone watching, pretending this isn't normal. Daniel's voice was calm, but every syllable hit like a gavel. And is it? Blake's eyes lowered. It's been normal my whole career. A long pause. The room held its breath. Daniel leaned back. That's the most honest testimony I've heard in years. The prosecutor tried to interject, but Daniel raised a hand. Enough. We've heard the facts. We've seen the footage. This hearing isn't just about one man. It's about a system that let him believe a uniform excused blindness. He looked out at the rows of officers in attendance, then back at Blake. You failed, Sergeant, not because you feared danger, but because you stopped seeing humanity. Blake's throat worked, but no words came. Daniel continued, voice tightening. You will be stripped of rank and pension. You will issue a public admission of misconduct, and you will, for the rest of your life, live with the weight of understanding what your fear cost. He struck the gavel. Bang. The sound reverberated through the room. Blake didn't move. Reporters whispered. Pens scratched. Flashes burst. Neil stood. Court adjourned. He left the bench and moved past the rows of people. As he passed Blake, he stopped briefly. Neither spoke. Daniel's eyes met his. Not with vengeance, but with something colder. Recognition of shared consequence. Outside, rain started again, light and persistent. Reporters swarmed, microphones flashing. Justice Ward, any comment on today's ruling? He didn't answer. A voice called out. A woman near the steps. Sir, do you think this changes anything? He stopped, glanced at her. That depends. Who was listening? Then, he walked toward his car, the umbrella held low. Behind him, the courthouse loomed, heavy, gray, eternal. Inside, Blake remained seated. Long after everyone left, the silence was thicker now, the kind that filled every crevice with regret. He finally stood, slow, deliberate. On the desk lay a folded piece of paper, his final statement for the record. He'd written only one line. I saw fear and called it duty. He left it there and walked out. That night, Daniel sat in his study, the house dark except for a single lamp. His son slept upstairs. The headlines glowed on his phone screen. Officer suspended. Courtroom reckoning. Racial bias exposed. He closed the device and looked out the window. The rain traced slow lines down the glass, mirroring the ones on his face. For the first time since that night, he allowed himself to exhale. Justice was done, but not peace. Outside, thunder rolled far away, soft and distant, like a warning the world hadn't yet learned to hear. Winter settled heavy over the city. The courthouse steps were slick with frost. The morning quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and a lone janitor, sweeping ice from the marble railing. Daniel Ward stood alone at the top, coat collar turned up against the wind. His breath came in faint clouds as he looked down at the street, the same street where a year ago, everything cracked. He wasn't there for work. He wasn't there for ceremony. He was there because the silence had started to feel like complicity again. Behind him, the doors opened. Reporters, cameras. Someone had leaked it, that the Chief Justice would resign today. He didn't wait for the questions. He just began speaking, voice steady, the cold air sharpening each word. I took an oath to uphold the law, he said, but law without conscience is a mirror with no reflection. We've built a system that punishes the visible and excuses the uniform. I can't serve it blind any longer. The reporters leaned in. Are you saying you're stepping down, sir? He nodded once. Justice should outlive the people who fail it. Flashbulbs burst like lightning. Someone shouted, do you regret what happened last year? Daniel paused. I regret that it had to happen for people to listen. He turned and walked down the steps, leaving their voices to chase him into the wind. Across town, in a small community center, Matthew Blake scrubbed graffiti from a wall. The words, pig, racist, thief, peeled away under the rag, one letter at a time. He didn't rush. He didn't complain. A local pastor approached him. "You don't have to do this, Matt. Nobody asked you to." Blake kept cleaning. "That's the point." The pastor studied him. "You were someone once. You had power." Blake stopped scrubbing. "Power without truth isn't worth cleaning up after." He dropped the rag into the bucket, hands trembling slightly. "You ever see your own name turn into a warning?" The pastor's eyes softened. "You can't erase what you did, but you can decide what the next page looks like." Blake looked at the wall, almost clean now. Just faint traces of red. "Then maybe I'll stop pretending I'm the one writing it." That evening, a television flickered in a diner window downtown. The news anchor's voice carried out into the street. "Chief Justice Daniel Ward has officially resigned today, citing moral conflict within the judicial system." His resignation speech has gone viral nationwide. Inside the diner, Blake sat in a booth alone, half-finished coffee cooling beside him. He watched Daniel's image on the screen. Resolute, untouchable. For a moment, he almost smiled. Then he took out his wallet and stared at the faded ID inside. Sergeant Matthew Blake. The name meant nothing now. Just a ghost in a uniform. He set a 20 on the counter and walked out into the freezing air. Later that night, Daniel arrived home to find a small envelope on his doorstep. No name, no stamp. Inside was a single police badge, scratched and dull, with a note attached. "Maybe this belongs to someone who sees it differently now." He stared at it for a long time. The metal was cold against his fingers. The engraving, "Serve and Protect," caught the lamplight in broken reflections. He set it on his desk beside the paper Blake's wife had given him months before. Two relics of a night neither man could escape. The line between them, fear, authority, survival, seemed thinner now, almost transparent. His phone buzzed. A text from his son. "Are you okay, Dad?" He typed back, "Still learning." Weeks passed. A small, independent journalist released a documentary titled The Night on Oak Street. It combined footage from the arrest, courtroom scenes, and interviews with both men. Daniel, in his study, Blake in the community center. In one scene, Blake said quietly, "I used to think the law was armor. Turns out, it's a mirror, and I didn't like what I saw in it." In another, Daniel looked directly into the camera. "I don't want my son to grow up fearing the system I helped build. Justice isn't protection, it's recognition." The film spread faster than anyone expected. Classrooms, town halls, police training seminars. Some called it propaganda, others called it truth. But for those who watched closely, it wasn't about a cop and a judge. It was about what happens when silence becomes a habit, and how breaking it costs something human. One night, Daniel and Blake met again, quietly, privately, in a park half-lit by amber. Neither had planned it. Both had just ended up there. Daniel spoke first. "You sent the badge." Blake nodded. "Didn't think you'd respond." "I almost didn't." "Then why did you come?" Daniel's answer was quiet. "Because forgiveness doesn't happen on paper." Blake looked down. "I'm not asking for that." "I know," Daniel said, "but I needed to see if you meant what you wrote." Blake hesitated, then met his eyes. "Every day I walk past people who look at me and see what I used to be. I don't argue anymore. I just listen." Daniel studied him. "That's more than most ever learn." They stood in silence, rain beginning again, slow and cold. Before leaving, Blake said, "You were right about one thing." "What's that?" He looked up at the gray sky. "Justice outlives the people who fail it." Daniel didn't reply. He just nodded once, turned, and walked away, his reflection fading against the wet pavement. The next morning, newspapers carried two stories side by side. Former Chief Justice establishes Civil Rights Scholarship Fund. Ex-police sergeant volunteers to train recruits in de-escalation ethics. Different headlines, same lesson. Months later, Daniel sat on a university stage, handing out the first scholarship certificates. His son watched from the front row. When the ceremony ended, a student approached him shyly. "Sir, can I ask you something?" Daniel smiled faintly. "If it's about law, maybe." The student shook her head. "Not law. Humanity. Do you think people like him, the ones who do harm, can change?" He thought for a long time before answering. "Only if they stop thinking they're the heroes." The student nodded slowly. "Then maybe there's hope." Daniel looked out at the hall, rows of faces, young, uncertain, alive. "Hope," he said softly, "isn't enough. But it's where the fight begins." Outside, the sky was clear for the first time in months. The city lights flickered like small, stubborn stars. somewhere across town. In that same community center, Blake locked up for the night. He paused at the door, looking at a mirror near the exit, cracked, old, uneven. He saw his reflection, older, weathered, human. He didn't look away this time. The city moved on. It always did. A month after the hearing, the headlines had faded, replaced by new outrage, new noise. The world had swallowed the story, digested it, and forgotten the taste. But Daniel Ward hadn't. Every morning he passed the same corner where the incident happened, asphalt patched, rain drains glistening. Nothing marked the memory except the echo that lived behind his ribs. He stopped one morning, long before sunrise. The air smelled of wet concrete and exhaust. He stood there, silent, hands in his coat pockets, and let the memory play again. The flashlight, the gun, the voice telling him to kneel, his son crying out. It wasn't just a moment anymore, it was a fracture. And he carried it everywhere. A soft voice behind him. You still come here. He turned. It was Lena Blake, the officer's wife. She looked smaller than he remembered, her eyes hollowed by sleeplessness. I didn't think you'd want to see me, Daniel said. I almost didn't come, she replied. But Matt, he's not the same. Daniel nodded slowly. Neither am I. She stepped closer, clutching a folded piece of paper. He wanted you to have this. Said it's not an apology. Said you'd understand why. Daniel hesitated before taking it. The paper was thin, creased, the handwriting sharp and slanted. The badge taught me to look for threats. You taught me what I refused to see. No signature, no closure, just truth. He folded it carefully, placed it inside his jacket. Lena's voice broke. He left, resigned, before they could fire him. We sold the house, he said. He couldn't live where people still called him sir. Daniel met her gaze. And you, I stayed, she whispered. Someone has to raise our son to know better than his father did. They stood in silence. Rain began again, soft as breath, when she left. Daniel remained a while longer, watching the light shift from blue to gray dot. Later that day, in chambers, a clerk knocked. Sir, there's a community forum tonight. They're asking if you'll speak. Daniel didn't look up from his papers. They don't need speeches. They need ears. The clerk hesitated. People are saying your case gave them hope. He finally looked at her. Hope's a dangerous thing when it ends with applause. She left quietly. That evening, he went anyway. The community center was packed. Families, activists, students, pastors. Cameras flashed when he entered. But he waved them off and sat in the audience instead of on stage. When the moderator spotted him, she gestured. Justice Ward, would you like to say a few words? He stood, slow, the room falling silent. He didn't go to the podium. He stayed where he was. I don't have a speech, he said simply. I have a story. He told them about the night, not the legal details, but the silence afterward, the way his son flinched when he saw a patrol car, the way his neighbors whispered sympathy but never outrage. I thought justice was a gavel, Daniel said quietly. Turns out, it's a mirror, and most people look away when it's handed to them. A young man raised his hand. So, what do we do? If even the Chief Justice can be treated like that, what's left? Daniel looked around the room, tired faces, restless eyes. You stop asking what the system will do, he said, and you start asking what you'll refuse to accept. Silence. Then, slowly, applause. Not loud, just steady. He sat down again, eyes distant. When the forum ended, he stepped outside into the cool night. Across the street, a small group of protesters held candles, quiet, calm, unwavering. One of them, a boy barely 16, called out, Sir, you think it'll change? Daniel looked at him, the candlelight flickering in the reflection of his glasses. If it doesn't, he said, we will. The boy smiled faintly. That's enough. Daniel turned to leave, but something made him stop. Down the block, in the dim light, a man stood watching, older, shoulders hunched, face shadowed. It was Blake. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. No words, no gestures. Two men bound by a night that neither could undo. Then Blake nodded, barely perceptible, and walked away into the dark dot. Daniel watched until the man disappeared, swallowed by rain and city light. He exhaled. Slow, heavy dot. When he got home, his son was waiting at the kitchen table. Homework spread out, milk glass half full. Dad, the boy said softly, are you okay now? Daniel sat beside him, looking at the paper. A history assignment titled Justice and Equality in America. He smiled faintly. Tired? Not yet, he said, but maybe you will be. His son nodded, scribbling something at the bottom of the page. Daniel glanced over. It read, "Justice isn't what you win, it's what you carry." The words hit him harder than any verdict. He leaned back, closing his eyes. Outside, the rain stopped at last, the city lights reflecting off the wet streets, sharp, alive, unhealed. In the silence, he whispered, maybe to himself, maybe to the world, let them remember.